Hi everybody, this is Craig Tiener for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by April, who is an advanced photographer from Chicago. April shot this with a Nikon D300, an effective focal length of 15 millimeters, and at f8 exposed the file for 1/180th of a second. April very recently created this image on the Mindful Eye's Whidbey Island workshop. And this is not going to be so much of a critique today as it is just a review, because this could be a photo of the week. It was one of my favorite images from the workshop, and I want to talk about things that I physically like about the image, but more than anything, the main takeaway I want you to get from the video today is something that's connected to the backstory of this image. On the Whidbey Island workshop, we went over to Port Townsend, Washington for the day. Craig, who's a professional photographer who lives there, was our guide, and can't thank him enough for helping us to have what may have been one of the most fun and exciting and inspiring days I've ever had on any workshop that I've ever taught. We just had such a great group of people. Port Townsend's such a friendly town. We met so many neat people, created so many beautiful photographs. It was such an awesome day. We'd spent a good part of the day on Main Street doing assignments that connected to building community and photographing people. And then towards the end of the day, we went out to a state park, Fort Worden State Park. It's just a stunning location for all kinds of photography. And you might have seen Fort Worden State Park if you saw the movie An Officer and a Gentleman. I think a large part of that movie was filmed there. And we took a couple of vans and left Main Street and drove out there. We were on the way to a parking lot that sits in front of sort of a big section of the fort, which is where we were going to work on our afternoon assignment. And I was in the car with, or in the van with April, and as we were driving down the road, we passed this little bunker that was sort of separate from the rest of the fort. And as we drove by and April looked over and saw the scene, it had such a big impact on her that she let out some kind of audible. I can't remember what she said, but it was the kind of communication where everybody looked and they saw this scene, and April just wanted to stop right there. But we continued to drive a little ways, and then we parked. And when we got out of the car and I gave everybody the assignment, April said that she was going to walk back along the road now for a walk up pretty good ways and go back to this scene. And that's one of the main things I want you to take away from the video today, is just this idea of honoring the voice of our intuition. So much of the time, these intuitive thoughts, they come in, and when they come in, it's not very convenient at all. We are driving down the road, and it may not be very practical to go back at all. Or we're walking the dog and we don't even have a camera. But the point is that these reactions to life that come from who knows where, they just pop in, and a lot of times they're very, very powerful. I believe that it may be one of the most powerful components of being a creative person. And something that's documented now, we're starting to sort of understand the brain, and we're starting to understand consciousness more and more. And something really interesting that we figured out is we think we've sort of pinpointed an area in the brain that's responsible for thoughts that are more intuitive. And another thing that we figured out is when we say yes to those types of impulses, that area of the brain, even in adulthood, can actually grow. That mass of cells can actually get bigger. And I just really encourage you to honor the voice of your intuition, and at the least to carry something with you where you can record the idea and write it down so that you won't forget. You know, a big hallmark of creativity, or the creative person, is capturing ideas. And a lot of people who followed me for very long at all know that I believe in a three-dimensional reality: conscious thought, subconscious, and I also believe in a superconscious reality where we're all connected. And I truly believe that there's just a wellspring of creativity that's flowing under us and above us and around us all the time. And I believe that our intuition connects to that. And so much of the time, those creative just insights, they can go away because they come in a flash. And if we don't either act on them right away or have a way to write them down so that we'll go back to them, we miss out on that. It's the main thing I want you to get from the video today. From the standpoint of reviewing the image and just physically having a very powerful reaction to this image, I think one of the main things that I liked about it, and really so many people in the workshop liked about it, is this image seems to be a combination of a more of an ordinary reality, an architectural subject, and an extraordinary reality, something that's surreal as we go through the window here. There's something about the dirt on the floor and the way this is weathered where you almost start to get a sense of this could be down and not just up. It could be water, it could be clouds, it could be sky. And so it almost ends up feeling like this is a portal into an extraordinary experience. Another takeaway from the video today that I'd really encourage you to think about is a concept that I reference as layers of story. When I'm composing images, I think about so many things. I think about light. I'm very, very driven by color and motivated by color, even if I'm going to convert something to black and white, and I really let myself move towards colors that speak to me. And I'm also very interested in gesture. If I'm photographing a person or even in things, I'm very interested in qualities of line that suggest archetypal gestures that are very powerful. And then another thing that I think about, in addition to camera position, extraordinary camera position, is layers of story. And what I mean by that in this image is one of the most important subjects to me are these grasses at the bottom. The grasses seem to suggest something that I can get my mind around that's very literal. And then because this has been converted to black and white and it's very bright, the wall itself almost seems surreal. When I look at this, I go back and forth from seeing this as flat to seeing the dimensional quality of the window casing. And then this seems fairly ordinary, but then as we go in, this seems like an extraordinary space. There's a detail here that's kind of mundane and ordinary, some kind of line or wire coming down. And then you have even another level of story, or another layer of story, which is this space that you can go into that's behind the wall. And so even though you look at this and upon looking at it, it's fairly symmetrical and can have a quality to it that is somewhat flat and graphical, there's this other sort of thing that sets up where there are all these different places where you start to get a feeling of depth. And I start to get affected in a powerful way from the standpoint of feeling like there's this physical illusion that I can move all the way through this space, starting with the grasses and moving through the window and going into this room and then around the wall, but also from a psychological standpoint that there are these different layers of story that have a big effect on me. On a very practical level, April's done a really beautiful job, whether she did it in camera or she also worked with Photoshop, and just shooting this in a way where it's very square. It's an architectural subject, and you get a real sense of the lines being square to the edge of the frame, and I think that's important in a shot like this. She shot this with a 15mm lens, so April either did a very good job with her tripod height and getting the back of the camera square to the subject matter, and or using something like transform skew in Photoshop to square everything up. I mean, that's a very mundane thing to mention at the end, but it really helps to tie the image together. I look at this image and it just has so much depth. I mean, even up in here, there are these wonderful archetypal shapes. There's a face there. It's this incredible texture. I just love the value balance between the grasses and the weathering up here, but then I love the fact that there's a difference. And, you know, one of the last things I'll say about this is it's almost like everywhere you look in this image, things are working. This difference between the weathering up here and the grasses down here rhymes or sort of repeats the difference in the sand in the bottom of the room and then the weathering on the paint and the top of the room. Just a stunning image. Big thank you to April for having the tenacity and just the follow through on her intuition to go her own way, which can be really difficult on a workshop, and go back and shoot this. I want to say a big thank you to all of you for being here. Would love to have you join us on a workshop. We still have just a few spaces left on our workshops for the rest of the year. Just coming up in a few days, we have a San Francisco workshop, long shot that anybody might be able to join us, but we'd love it if you could. We're going to have a great time in San Francisco. We have one space left on a Next Step workshop, one of my favorite workshop programs that we teach in Savannah. And Brian Allen, one of my all-time favorite photographers and just an amazing human being and teacher, has a couple of spaces left on his Location People 2 workshop. Would love to see you on a workshop. And want to say a big thank you to you for being here on The Mindful Eye. Hope to see you again real soon on The Daily Critique.